In this video, we're going to take our centered ball of clay and turn it into a cylinder. So we have a nice gumdrop shaped piece of clay. In order to do this, we need these tools: wooden knife, wooden rib or metal rib, needle tool, sponge tool, wire tool, and a container with water. I also like to use a big sponge to keep my hands clean. So, just like with centering, we need to have water on the clay, in between our hands and the clay, so that our hands don't stick. And our first step is to create a space within this solid form that will allow us to manipulate the clay from the inside. I like to kind of support the clay on both sides, just to kind of gauge where the center is. And then with my thumbs touching, I like to push into the clay, with creating contact with my whole thumb, not just going straight into the clay, but kind of pushing in with my thumbs at an angle. This will create a nice kind of bowl shape on the inside as opposed to just a straight column. Another way you can approach this is by creating a support structure with one of your hands. I'm using my left hand, and then with my right hand, I'm using my right middle finger. You could use any finger or a couple fingers to push down, and again, using my whole finger is in contact with that clay to create a nice curve on the inside. So now that I've gone a decent amount of the way down, I want to check to see how thick the clay is at the bottom. For that, I will use this needle tool. I will place it all the way through the clay to the wheel head, and then with my finger I will place it to where the clay begins or ends, so that I can see how much clay is in between, how thick the clay is at the bottom. So it's a little thicker than I want. I probably want between 1/4 and 1/2 inch. So I'm going to just go down a little bit more and check it again. Wheels off when I do this. Pretty good. I'll go just a smidge farther. And now I'm going to do this next step, which is creating a nice flat base at the bottom. So in order to do that, I'm going to take my hand while it's inside, I'm going to curl my fingers towards my body, and then I'm just going to pull the clay towards myself, keeping my fingers parallel to the wheel. That will create a nice flat bottom for our cylinder. Also at the same time, my left hand is supporting the clay on the outside. And then, depending on what form you want to make, will determine how far out you want to go. This will define the size of the base of your piece. So if you want a wider bottom, this is the time to make that adjustment. If you want a narrower bottom, then you would not pull out as far. So now what I'm doing is taking my finger across that area that I just opened up, and just kind of with light pressure downward, I'm just dragging my finger across, just like this. That helps compress the clay so that when it's drying, it doesn't crack. Now I'm going to do my first I'm going to move the clay upwards now. So with my hand on the inside at an angle, like this, I'm going to gather the clay with my right hand and push into my left hand that's on the inside. So it's nice to have a nice little ledge here. If there isn't one, you can create one with your finger by pushing just gently inward on the clay. I have a good ledge here for my finger to collect the clay. And now with my hand at that angle, my hands touching, I'm just gonna push the clay into my left hand. Right at the very end, I raised my left hand up a little bit, but most of the time my left hand was just staying still, and I was just pushing into this finger right there. I'm gonna create this ledge again. The purpose of the ledge is to allow my right hand to rest against the wheel head, while my left hand is, the lowest it can go is to that, the foot that we created, which is about somewhere between 1/2 and 1/4 inch. And I'm gonna use that to my advantage because I want my hands to be, my fingers that are pushing in on the clay to be slightly offset. So now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna pull this wall up. So I'm gonna push out from the inside and in from the outside. My hands are touching, my thumbs are touching, and I just want my hands to stay in the, in the same relationship to themselves. So the relationship of my fingers is static. They're just slowly moving the clay up the wall. Upwards. Also notice that I'm creating a form that is wider at the bottom than it is at the top. When making cylinders, this is really helpful. The wider the clay gets to the top, the harder it is to control. Now I want to compress the clay at the top, so with my left hand, I'm supporting, and my right hand, I'm just applying a slight amount of pressure downwards. And use more water. It's nice also you can use the sponge to apply water. I just want enough water so that my hands aren't sticking. So again, I'm going to create a nice little ledge down at the bottom. If I collect any extra clay, I can just scrape it into my water bucket. Make sure I have enough water at the bottom and on the inside. I'm just going to repeat the same step again. Pushing out from the inside, in from the outside. Gathering a bead of clay. Hands in a consistent relationship to each other. Just slowly working that clay upwards. One thing that you'll want to be aware of is kind of the amount of pressure you're applying to the clay. And when you're at there, when there's more clay at the bottom, so that you'll be more firm with the clay when you're closer to the wheel head. And as you kind of come up this form, you will be applying less and less pressure. Applying water, and I'm going to do this pull one more time. I'm going to create a divot at the bottom again, discarding any clay that I get, and then I'm just using, what I'm doing right now is I'm just gathering clay with my hand, water with my hand, and just applying it back onto that, onto our pot. So I'm going to slow the wheel down just a little bit for my last pull. And then same thing, out from the inside, in from the outside. Most amount of pressure right now, I'm at the bottom. And just kind of slowly releasing pressure. Really what you want is your hands to maintain, or your fingers to maintain the same distance from each other. And to do that, you'll just consistently be releasing pressure as you move up. I didn't say this earlier, but this is an important thing, is when you get to the top, you really want to ease away from the clay. You don't want to jump away from the clay. You just want to gently release. This is true whenever you're approaching the clay or departing the clay. Again, I will compress this rim. Also, we can kind of think about what shape we want it to be also. So I also find a nice way to compress the rim is kind of with the I don't know what this is, the slot of my finger. Kind of gives it a nice shape. And now we need to prepare this to remove it from the wheel. This is a cylinder right now, but there are some steps that we need to take in order to get this off the wheel and finish it up a little bit. Okay, so now we're gonna remove any water that's on the inside with our sponge. So I'm gonna squeeze out any extra water I have on the inside and just kind of get in there and just drag the sponge along the bottom, acquiring any slip or water. And I squeeze out again. Next, I'm gonna true up these walls a little bit and remove any extra wetness or slip or water. So I'm gonna pick a point at the bottom and then just push with my inside hand. I'm using my middle finger and I'm just slowly raising it into the wooden rib. And I went up pretty far before I started I started raising the wooden rib up. There. So I'll just kind of go over that again. So my left hand's on the inside pushing out, the wooden ribs on the outside. Notice the angle. It's allowing the clay to pass through it. It's not coming into the clay where it would kind of snag it. My left hand is slowly raising up, pushing the clay into the wooden rib. And so this is cleaning up the surface as well as gathering any extra material that we don't want to be there. So you can see the material I've gathered. I just like to gather it with my fingers, put it in my slop bucket. So now I'm going to remove this extra clay at the bottom. I'm going to have my hand on the inside again. And I'm just going to follow the wall. Just go straight, try and continue that line that we had all the way down to the wheel head. I'm going to remove the tool, remove my hand, turn the wheel off. I'm just going to cut using this, sharp edge, I guess. Cut into this clay. I'm positioning the tool so that it's going to push the clay away from the pot. And then with a very slow wheel speed, I'm just going to remove all of this clay at the bottom. We can recycle this. This is a nice clay to use again. And now lastly, I'm just going to create a groove at the bottom that our wire tool will be able to fit, or we'll guide our wire tool when we're cutting our clay off the wheel, our pot off the wheel. And then I'm going to use the wire tool. I like to kind of shorten it using my fingers, wrapping it around my fingers, and then using my thumbs, I can push it firmly against the wheel head. I like to pull it towards myself, but you could also, whatever feels more comfortable, push away from yourself if you feel that's more comfortable. Usually one pass is enough, sometimes two makes it release a little easier. Now I'm going to clean my hands up. This is to allow me to remove the clay. So if I have clay on my hands, it's going to make it slippery or sticky. So my hands are clean. I'm just going to pat them dry slightly. I'm going to put my pot onto a wear board. It's common to have this to the side, but to allow you to see this easier, I'm going to set it on my lap. And then at the lowest point I can, just above the wheel head on this cylinder, I'm going to grab the clay gently. I'm not pushing on it, but with as much of my hand as possible. I'm going to slightly rock it to release it and then lift it straight up and set it on my wear board. Now let's cut this open and see what a cylinder looks like from the inside. Starting from the bottom. So we can see that the walls are relatively even in thickness, a little bit thicker at the bottom, a little bit thicker, towards the top. It's nice. This thickness at the bottom will give us room to trim this clay when it's dried up a little bit, and will allow us to cut a foot into the cylinder. And that's throwing a cylinder. Hope you learned a lot. Thanks for watching.